Welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D, and I also talk about its lore and its history and what it's like to fight. Today's monster is actually a request from a viewer. This comes from Jason Dowd on Facebook, who asked if I would draw a Yuan-Ti abomination. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a Yuan-Ti abomination, but I think it's also important to talk about the Yuan-Ti as a whole species. So what are the Yuan-Ti for a start? Well, they are snake people. If you are familiar with World of Warcraft, then you will have seen something like what I'm going to draw here today in the form of the Naga, a sort of serpent body, humanoid torso with humanoid arms, give or take, some scales here and there, and definitely with a kind of reptilian, snake-like head. Important distinction though, Naga are actually also present in D&D, but they are a totally separate species to the Yuan-Ti. The Naga look a little bit different as well. They have again, I use this term loosely, but they have a kind of human face or head, and then their body is entirely just a snake's body, so just like one long tube with a human's face. And unlike the Yuan-Ti, they are immortal. They are serpent spirits, guardians of nature. Some can be benevolent, some can be malevolent, definitely magical in nature. So much so that if they were to be pretty much destroyed, they can survive even as their skeletal bones. The Yuan-Ti, not so much. These things are definitely mortal. Interestingly as well, they were once humans. Not talking about individually, they didn't sort of transform from person to person. It's not a curse, it's not like the werewolf or any other were creature. The Yuan-Ti evolved, we'll say. They had a common ancestor in humans. The story goes that the Yuan-Ti were once ancient tribal humans when that species was kind of emerging from being cave-dwelling, if there were sort of Neanderthals in your D&D world around this kind of time. So these ancient tribal humans are just playing around with the idea of technology, developing fire, maybe chipping some stones into the shapes of wheels. Who knows? Who knows what happened in your D&D world? But either way, when humanity was barely a thing, some of them decided to worship snakes, snake deities. And little by little, they heard whispers back through the darkness. These snake spirits were definitely listening, and they taught the people that would become the Yuan-Ti ancient rituals, horrific cannibalistic practices, dark rites. In some cases, communing and supposedly breeding with snakes. Result of these dark practices and heinous magics were the Yuan-Ti. Part snake, part human. And interestingly, the human to snake ratio of the Yuan-Ti varies from Yuan-Ti to Yuan-Ti, some which look far more human, and some of them, like the abomination here, look, aside from obviously rocking a six-pack and some abs and some pecs and what have you, very, very different from humans. The Yuan-Ti see this as a beautiful moment for their species, rather than a disgusting or abhorrent transformation as we might see it, sort of the kind of Innsmouth look style, people gradually turning more fish-like over time, worshipping these dark gods, becoming abominations over time. The Yuan-Ti really, really loved this. They thought this was a fantastic thing. They saw this as shedding their humanity. Now, the Yuan-Ti actually really hate humans. They really dislike them. I mean, in fairness, they don't really like any species that is not Yuan-Ti. They're quite xenophobic that way. They're kind of more okay with things like Dragonborn, or dragons in general, kobolds, things that look reptilian in nature. They speak Draconic, for instance. But they view their fleshy cousins, humans, and the creatures that associate with them as really primitive, which is kind of ironic for a species which has basically stagnated since what is apparently the dawn of humanity. They're often depicted living in cities which are kind of Mesoamerican, kind of Aztec, Mayan, that sort of thing. They have those kind of that kind of a feel about it, and apparently they have done since their transformation. Which, fair dues, you'd be pretty impressed with that. If your cousins are trying to figure out fire, and just through worshipping some snake gods, you get taught about the technology of smelting and farming, of irrigation, mathematics, geometry, all this amazing stuff that humans wouldn't figure out for ages, and even the intricate powers of magic, the likes of which would not be seen again until, maybe if elves were doing it, who knows, but not be seen by humans until this kind of fantasy medieval style era that you are most likely playing in. Either way, this made them feel very superior. They hid away in their giant cities, in their sort of Mesoamerican style cities, and using this incredible technology, this incredible magic from their snake deities, they founded an empire, taking slaves of the primitive humans and of the other native inhabitants that lived nearby in their sort of swamp kingdoms, their tropical kingdoms, what have you. And as a result of being taught this information by their gods, being taught this way of life by their gods, they view that as the absolute pinnacle of what it is to be a creature. They seek to emulate their gods, to become more like them over time, both physically by changing and by living in the ways that they might approve of. Now, it's not a sort of benevolent, created, feeling the love, kumbaya my lord style relationship that they have with their gods. They see them as a vehicle to gaining more power. They have no love for them, they just worship them. They think they are incredible creatures. In my opinion, it sounds a bit more like a kind of warlock's pact with some sort of immensely powerful creature. They seek to siphon power from it and become more like it, perhaps even to replace their own gods with themselves. So on top of being xenophobic, they are apparently also narcissists. Well, who are the gods that they seek to emulate? Well, that kind of depends on your setting. You may not have these gods in your setting, but typically, if you're going by the book, these are the gods that they are supposed to worship. The first of which is Dendar, the night serpent. Again, to hammer home this idea of the Innsmouth look, this likelihood, this connection to the horrific nightmare-like terrors of the mind that are conjured up by H.P. Lovecraft stories, this kind of transformative horror. Dendar fits the bill of some sort of Cthulhu-like creature. Dendar is the night serpent, a looming omen of the end of times. Dendar lurks in feverish dreams, in nightmares, in the cold sweat on people's brows when they wake, shaking from a vision that they can't quite remember. Worshippers of Dendar are known as nightmare speakers, warlocks that honor their deity through acts of terror and receive magical power in return. Rather than killing their enemies, they like to threaten them and torture them, drawing out their suffering as much as possible in tribute to their dark god. Mershulk is the next one of their gods traditionally, the master of the pit. This is a deep, slumbering god. Again, we're getting very strong Cthulhu vibes here. Worshippers of Mershulk are more like caretakers. They kind of hope that they'll have beneficial treatment by looking after him when he inevitably reawakens, shedding his skin and transforming into a new, terrible form. Again, a bit Cult of Cthulhu-ish. Seth, with two S's. This is not Seth Green or Seth MacFarlane or any other Seth that you might know. Seth, S-S-E-T-H. Seth is the Mind Whisperer, and apparently appeared to the Yuan-Ti in the form of one of their own, but only winged. A giant winged serpent conjures up this kind of Quetzalcoatl style Mesoamerican deity who pretty much just wants to be worshipped. Apparently he promised to lead the Yuan-Ti away from the brink of defeat and back to the pinnacle of world domination in return for their veneration. So it kind of depends on your setting how well the Yuan-Ti are doing in terms of reclaiming the world from their primitive ancestors. Depends on the power of Seth. But if they're not doing very well, then Seth is just some bloke called Seth. Now, obviously, if these gods aren't in your campaign setting, or you've got a very different theme, in Volo's Guide there are a bunch of different gods that could kind of fit the bill, that are likely to create a race of serpent people. For example, if you're going more kind of Celtic, Game of Thronesy, that kind of thing, the creators of D&D recommend gods like Morrigan. If you're going for ancient Greek, then Ares or Hecate might be more into the whole transformative, destructive magic that might lead to the end of humankind. If you're going for an Egyptian theme, which is not something I've ever tried, but I would really like to, actually, they recommend Set, or for Norse, you go for Hela or her father, Loki. Loki is known to have spawned a lot of very crazy creatures, including a multi-legged horse that his father rides around on, Hela herself obviously, and Fenrir the wolf that is supposed to devour the sun. So I'm sure he's not opposed to spawning a legion of serpent people. But yes, either way, those are the gods of the Yuan-Ti, and they kind of believe that anyone who doesn't want to emulate these great deities, these horrendous creatures, is hugely primitive. They don't want to go back to just trying to figure out fire, even though society has moved on very, very far from that. They're stuck in their ways, we'll say. That said, the Yuan-Ti are known to make friendships and deals, bargains, and other sort of positive things with humans and other creatures. And this is because apparently they believe that they cannot take the world by force. They're not as strong, they don't have a strong footing as they did in the Stone Age. Everyone's got magic now, and some people might even have guns and knights and who knows what else. They don't stand as good of a chance of taking over the world, reclaiming their empire by force anymore. So they make deals with these beings that they view to be disgusting, help them, entrance them if they can, enslave them if they can, even better, but they're often seen to be doing beneficial things with creatures that they revile. And apparently, that is not them switching their alignment, they are all apparently neutral evil, generally speaking, and they seek desperately to find any opportunity to betray those people. They want to use them for mutually beneficial reasons, but it's said that they'll con you long enough that you'll never notice the knife or the fangs in your back. They're viewed as being entirely unsympathetic, psychopathic, and uncaring creatures. They are emotionless in their belief in their superiority. They view the other creatures as disgusting and a nuisance, perhaps as a human might find an ant. They believe themselves so utterly superior. And where does this attitude come from? Well, I mean, other than these gods, we know that snakes have this kind of bad reputation for being very unsympathetic, being very cold and emotionless, very calculating and smart, traits which the Yuan-Ti definitely share. And I think that's because of the term the lizard part of the brain. We all have brains in our heads, and the very, very central part of that is commonly referred to as the lizard part of the brain. It's the limbic cortex, the limbic system you may have heard of. And it's the part of the brain that's responsible for addiction, mood, the fight and flight response, fear, and so on and so forth. These very primal, these very base parts of the brain. It's very base instincts, we'll say. It's often referred to as the lizard part of the brain because it's believed that lizards literally only have this as their brain function. They have no kind of like higher brain functions, apparently. And so emulating this trait, the Yuan-Ti similarly feel only the most base primal drives that force them forward. But according to a National Geographic article that I read the other day, there's a herpetologist called Melissa Amarello who claims, and I'm quoting here, that they're, when referring to snakes that is, that they're shy, gentle creatures with rich family lives. They can have friends, they can care for their kids. So who knows? Maybe snakes are just getting a bad rap, but either way, it seems that this interpretation helped to inspire the idea behind the Yuan-Ti and their emotionlessness when it comes to other creatures. They still dwell in these ancient cities, separated and segregated from everybody else, waiting and biding their time until their gods give them enough power so that they can kind of take over the world, remove all the fleshy creatures, all the humans, and everything else from your D&D campaign until nothing survives but the reptilian. Now, when it comes to how they actually behave inside their own cities, they have a really strict caste system, which is super, super simple. Basically, the more snake you look, the more rights you have. The Yuan-Ti abomination, like the one that I'm drawing here, is like the most serpenty that you can be, and as a result they are the kind of ruling class. They are top of the top of the food chain, sometimes literally in those cities, as the Yuan-Ti are known to be cannibalistic, both in rituals and just when they get peckish. Just beneath them in the pecking order are the Malazons. Not super different. They still have the same kind of snake-like head, they're covered in scales, but they usually have a human-like body. They have human arms and legs, they have torsos like this one here, but they're also a little bit more capable of walking here and there rather than relying on sliding. Beneath them are the ironically named purebloods. They are kind of the lowest caste member, and they look very, very human. They are basically humans with the odd scale here and there, serpent-like eyes, kind of a serpent nose, nostrils, if that makes sense. Think Voldemort, and you're on the right track. These people are sort of outcasts in both societies. They can't go into human society because they look so snake-like, and they kind of find humans disgusting, so they wouldn't really want to leave their cities anyway, but also being so human-like, they are the lowest of the low in this society. That's reflected in their challenge rating as well. Purebloods are challenge rating 1, so you're likely to see a lot of them pretty early on. Malazons are challenge rating 3, and the Abomination that I'm drawing here is a challenge rating 7 creature. Now, one thing I thought was a really fun nod here is I don't know if you've ever heard of David Icke and his conspiracy theory that reptilian people, shapeshifters, are secretly controlling the world as some sort of horrendous Illuminati of unfeeling serpent people. Turns out what he was talking about the whole time were the Yuan-Ti. So don your tinfoil hats, because we're going to go and look at the Yuan-Ti a little bit more deeply. Now, the pureblood cannot transform in any way. They look as they look. They're all Voldemorty, but they're going to cause problems for you because they can cast spells. They can cast animal friendship with snakes, so they might have a legion of small snakes that could cause you problems at early levels. And all of the Yuan-Ti, because they gained their magical knowledge so long ago, so intrinsically in their blood, and maybe alien, strange, and odd magic, that all the Yuan-Ti species have magic resistance. So definitely a challenge for the first level wizard of the group. They're immune to being poisoned. They definitely cause the rogue a few problems as well. On top of that, they are skilled in most forms of combat. Scimitars, short bows, you name it, they get multi-attacks. They're pretty tough for a challenge rating 1 creature. But as we move onto the Malazon and the Abomination, we can see exactly what David Icke was talking about. They are intrinsically shapeshifters by nature. Now, the Abomination here can shape change into a large snake or back into its true form. It can bite you for 1d6 plus 4 piercing damage, and then a further 3d6 poison damage. It can constrict you, grappling you and squeezing the life out of you. It's strong with a scimitar or a longbow, just like the pureblood. And when it has arms, it doesn't always need to, they can cast spells as well, including that animal friendship with snakes, suggestion and fear, the psychic work of their gods flowing through them. But the Malazon, they can transform into a medium snake or back into their true form, but they also come in a lot of different forms. Some with a human body and a snake head, some with a human head and a body with snakes for arms, independent arms of living snakes, and the third type is a human head with an upper body with a serpentine lower body instead of legs, just like the Abomination. They all get different attacks. Naturally, the second one, being enormously hungry with all of those different heads, makes a lot of biting attacks. I have to wonder what that would look like when they transform into a snake. Would it be a snake with 3 heads? Who knows? But either way, they are transforming snake people, okay? They are shape-changing snake people. They don't turn into humans, maybe just because they find that disgusting. Who knows? They could be living among us, ruling all of our nations secretly. Now, the Yuan-Ti are pretty much exclusively a D&D property. We may have seen their like in the Naga in World of Warcraft, maybe the Gorgons, Medusa from ancient Greek and ancient Roman mythology, but not much talk of ancient serpent-human hybrids. They're solely a D&D thing. They are not sort of taken from mythologies as far as I can find it. I mean, if you can think of one, let me know in the comments. Not immediately coming to my head. And they were definitely created before David Icke's wonderful conspiracy theory of shape-shifting lizard people. So I might have to conclude that these are D&D Gary Gygax original, using themes from Lovecraft, as I mentioned before, these kind of old gods that they worship, transforming them in the kind of Innsmouth way, becoming more and more disgusting and slimy and reptilian over time. Either way, they are an immensely fun group of creatures to put in your campaign. Certainly if you are sending your adventurers temple raiding, going to sort of Indiana Jones style, Mesoamerican themed jungles, swamps and so on, they might run into some Yuan-Ti. And if they do, I really hope this video was useful for you. I found this great fun to draw, I have to say. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions of creatures that you'd love for me to draw and to research, just let me know in the comments down below. I have a few to be going on that you guys have asked for, and a load more that I really want to do as well, but I prefer to draw what you'd like to see. So just let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like it, favorite it, and maybe share with someone who you think might enjoy it as well. That really helps us to grow from little serpent hatchlings into a fully fledged Yuan-Ti. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.